I'm humbled by the previous speakers, and I'm not really sure what I'm doing here because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a policy analyst, I'm not an entrepreneur, and I do not bring a magic solution to the world's problem to this stage. All I can offer you is a personal story, but I hope it's one that connects with that other side of your brain that yearns to connect emotionally to the world that sustains us. I've been on a mission to bridge the gap between the general public's appreciation for nature and the scientific understanding of life, to inform and inspire people about the wonder of our living planet. And I'm going to take you on a journey today, a journey through time with science as our guide, but without the facts and the figures that often turn people off. I promise you there will be no more pie charts and no more diagrams in my presentation. Instead, I will use images as a lure and words to stroke your imagination. But first, a bit of personal history. I grew up in Holland. I moved to California to do research in environmental impact assessment. I have a background in environmental economics. But like many other immigrants to the West Coast, I made a break with my past. I became a photographer. Even though I knew little about photography, nor did I have any training in biology, so I learned through trial and error. I quickly discovered the public appeal of animal portraits and how they can connect people emotionally with a world they may never see for themselves. People often ask me about the dangers of working with wildlife up close, but I'm not that worried about the animals. I can usually tell what they have in mind. It's the bush pilots I worry about. I often have to trust my life to total strangers to get to where I want to go. Notice the logo on this plane that dropped me off someplace in the Amazon. Alas de Esperanza, the wings of hope. And hope is really what you need in this kind of situation if you want to make it out again. As my understanding of nature matured, I began to look at animals less as photographic trophies and more as ambassadors for ecosystems. And when biodiversity emerged as a new concept for understanding nature as a network of relationships, I set out to explore that subject visually. And I ended up one day on the shores of New Jersey's Delaware Bay. Perhaps an unlikely place to associate with biodiversity, but I went there for the same reason those birds were gathered there. Horseshoe crabs. They come out of the water each spring to spawn at the tide line. They're ancient creatures and evolved their habits many millions of years ago, long before there were any predators on land. But these days, their eggs are prized by the birds. My mission there in Delaware Bay was to portray the crabs as a natural resource for birds and for people. Local fishermen take way too many of them for use as bait. While nearby, a new economy based on a sustainable harvest of crab blood for higher value biomedical applications was developing. But one evening, when the crabs came out of the water by the thousands and the modern world faded away in twilight, I felt like I was transported far back in time. And I wondered whether it might be possible to tell the story of life on Earth from its earliest beginnings to its present diversity by creating a sequence of images that could evoke nature through time. That experience was the beginning of a pilgrimage. I wanted each image to speak to a certain point on an evolutionary timeline, as if I'd been transported there magically by a time machine. Now, some destinations were obvious. The giant tortoises of Galapagos have long been symbols for evolution. The islands are a time capsule where mammals never made it. So it's not that hard to imagine a time when large land reptiles dominated life. The farther I went back in time, the harder my mission became. This image from Kamchatka represents a typical ecosystem from, say, 1 billion years ago, made up of only bacteria and algae. And I had to make sure no plants or animals of any kind were visible because those did not evolve until much, much later. I ended up in a remote lagoon in Western Australia, where life forms whose lineage goes back to the very beginning of life still dominate the landscape. What looks like boulders along the tide line here are actually primitive living reefs known as stromatolites. 3 billion years ago, they changed the world. They were the first life forms capable of converting sunlight into energy through photosynthesis, and they released oxygen as a byproduct. They literally created our modern atmosphere and changed the course of life in doing so. The very air we all breathe today here in this auditorium goes back to this momentous development. If they had not been there then, we simply would not be here today. You get a sense of how different things were on early Earth when you go to an active volcano. We can't breathe that kind of stuff. This is Kilauea on Hawaii, and I was there with my wife and partner, Chris Ekstrom, who's a former National Geographic writer, with whom I created this and many other projects. And Chris is in the audience here today without her respirator. After several years of field work, we were suffering from a syndrome familiar to scientists. We knew too much. So in order to make the story of life more accessible, we decided to replace complexity with simplicity by paring down the images and the stories to lyrical impressions. And for the book that we published about this magic story of life, called Life: A Journey Through Time, and it's available here, I believe, we created a script to serve as a narrative backbone. And I'm going to recite some excerpts from this poem as I take you on an abbreviated journey through time, from the Big Bang to the present. The journey of life starts in space, where energy becomes matter, turning into shapes over time, solidifying into spheres, fueled by fire. Once fire gives way, Earth emerges. But this is an alien planet. The moon is closer, things are different. Geysers vent steam. And when Earth cools, rain falls for eons, giving birth to oceans. Water is a key to life, but in frozen form it is a latent force. But this planet is restless. It roils inside, and where that energy touches water, a new element appears: life. Life arises around cracks in the earth. It begins to multiply, growing structures under a primeval sky, back to those stromatolites. And once single cells can capture sunlight, they alter the atmosphere, creating a breath for all life thereafter. Life needs a breath, and it needs a membrane too, so it can replicate and mutate. Shallow seas nurture life early on. As it grows into more complex forms, life evolves. When light and oxygen increase, life learns to move and begins to see. Out of the sea, marine slugs become land snails, and fish try amphibian life. Frogs adapt to deserts. Lichens develop as a co-op. Fungi marry algae. They cling to rock and eat it too. True land plants arise, leafless at first. The fundamental forms of ferns follow, bearing spores that foreshadow seeds. Life begins to flourish in swamps. When a great change rocks Earth, continents get dry. And on land, things turn tough. With eggs, life has a chance on land to shelter new forms in the making. Life protects itself, its scales and skin, as it ventures farther inland. Dinosaur time still shimmers in parts of Madagascar and Brazil. In birds, life gains new mobility. Flamingos cover continents. Migrations get underway. Birds witness the emergence of flowering plants, and water lilies are among the first. In Australia, an ordinary lily turns into an extraordinary grass tree, while in Hawaii, a tiny daisy becomes a giant silver sword. When Gondwana land breaks up, life gets lush. And that is when true jungles arise, sparking new layers of interdependence. Orchids emerge, with genitalia shaped to lure insects, and coevolution entwines plants with insects and plants with birds forever. When birds can't fly, they become vulnerable. Extinction usually happens slowly, but sometimes it comes fast. When an asteroid hits Earth 65 million years ago, a whole world vanishes in flames. But there are witnesses, survivors in the dark. And when the sky is clear, a new world is born. A world fit for mammals. From tiny shrew-like creatures accustomed to the dark, new forms radiate. Bats take to the air. Civets begin to slink along the ground. Hyenas evolve. Then cheetahs getting faster because their prey gets faster still. Grasslands create new opportunities for hunters and the hunted. Growing big is one answer, but size always comes at a price. Some mammals turn back to water. Sea lions get sleek, and dolphins move into a world without bounds. Primates evolve in jungles, looking like tarsiers at first, turning into lemurs not much later. It is in lemurs that learning becomes reinforced, and when forests dry out once more, bands of apes venture into the open, and going upright becomes a lifestyle. So who are we? Are we brothers of masculine chimps? Are we sisters of more feminine bonobos? We are all of them and more. We are molded by the same force. Every life form on this planet contains the story of its origins. What lies within mirrors what can be seen outside. The blood veins in our hands echo the coarse water traces on this earth. And our brains are celebrated brains. They reflect the drainage of a tidal marsh. But it is our brains that enable us to do something new. We can imagine a whole earth, with life as a force in its own right. Life has altered Earth. It covers its planet like a skin. And where it does not, as in Greenland in winter, the margins for existence become clear. But wherever water is liquid, it is a womb for cells green with chlorophyll, and that molecular marvel has made a difference. It fuels everything. The entire animal world runs on oxygen, produced originally by bacteria, then algae, and now plants. Their waste is our breath, and our exhalation is their intake. We are connected, like water on land, with clouds in the sky. This earth is alive as a whole. It's made its own membrane, an atmosphere that became a biosphere, made of land, sea, and air, energized by all living things, forming a whole that is held together and sustained by the collective force of life. Now, this is truly a miraculous story, how a naked piece of smoldering rock that was formed 4.5 billion years ago was transformed into a living planet. But of course, the story doesn't stop there. It continues with our own presence on the planet and there's urgency to resolving the challenges in that relationship. We all know what we're talking about. Our human footprint is increasing dangerously. Climate change is going to hit people everywhere, but in developing countries the hardest. And there is a sense of desperation in efforts like this to bottle up seed samples from around the world and keep them in cold storage just in case the plants themselves will vanish. Clearly, what we need is leadership on every front, and I cling to hope. A week ago, I was heartened to hear Bill Gates speak at the TED conference in LA. In essence, he said, if we do not come up with solutions to the climate crisis, his investments in human health will really not pay off. There are many, many reasons to be pessimistic, and yet I do not want to give in. When I heard these kids ask perceptive questions during a tour of one of the exhibitions we organized, I realized they are much more aware than I was at their age. They are reasons for hope. And as I'm sure Sylvia said yesterday, it is never too late to turn things around. I believe, and Chris does as well, that combining science with art can be a very powerful way to reach people both intellectually and emotionally, and we need to connect them to the issues with both sides of their brains. So with composer Philip Glass and conductor Maren Alsop, we created a symphonic version of this life project. It has been staged at a number of special occasions around the world to empower people and initiatives in science, education, and conservation. I arrived here from London last night, where Maren conducted a London Symphony 2 days ago in a performance of life to celebrate the Year of Biodiversity. And we have plans to travel the show. Perhaps we can even bring it to Naples to inspire people at this critical time. So I salute you all for what you are doing to ensure there will be a future for all life on Earth, for all of what I've shown you, and for the benefit of our children and our children's children. And I would like to close by shutting up now and by sharing with you a short clip from a previous performance of life with Maren conducting the Baltimore Symphony.
Life, a journey through time.
Thank you.